The Sacramento Kings need a new young star to lead their franchise. They also desperately need a point guard and someone who can help them remain competitive today while also giving them a promising tomorrow. Well, LaMelo Ball checks all three of those boxes, but could he possibly be available? Doug Branson, host of the Locked On Hornets podcast, joins me here to talk about just that on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time. Time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all offseason long. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports anchor and reporter for ABC 10 News. And LaMelo Ball has never been my favorite player. He's never been towards the top of the list of favorite players. I've always had my kind of reservations about LaMelo Ball, whether it was his personality and maturity as the leader and star of a franchise, or his countless injury issues, the fact that he has spent his entire career. Now, this isn't exactly his fault, but he's spent his entire career on a organization that has done next to nothing in terms of winning. How much is that his fault, and how much is that the fault of the organization, right? LaMelo Ball has always been intriguing because he is such a unicorn type player, right? His size for a guard, but his skill with the basketball, his ability to score, but also to facilitate and to run an offense. He's somebody that I don't know how safe of a bet it would be to acquire. But he's somebody that if you're the Sacramento Kings and you're looking to check those three major boxes that I laid out there in that introduction, a young star to build around, someone to help you remain competitive right away, and a point guard, he's very different from a Drew Holiday because of the youth factor. Now, he's paid a lot of money, which the Kings would have to be aware of. And if you're acquiring LaMelo Ball and paying what is likely to be the high price to get the Charlotte Hornets to move on from LaMelo Ball, you are essentially taking the risk or investing in him, believing in him as the new number one guy for your franchise, and are essentially taking the bet that he is more of a product of his environment. His success or lack of success team-wise in Charlotte has more to do with the Hornets and less to do with him. You're also taking the risk of the countless ankle injuries that he's dealt with over the course of his career. You're taking that all in your stand. I still believe that he can be a number one. And while Sacramento has never really been the most stable environment consistently, they have assets here and pieces here that you could add LaMelo Ball to, where you have the opportunity for him to be more successful, more competitive right away than he ever was and really would be in Charlotte, at least at this point in time. I don't know. I don't know if it's the right risk to take, but it's somebody that if Scott Perry, new Kings GM Scott Perry, is looking at his options and keeping his options open and looking to build towards the future while also remaining competitive, one, because we know ownership wants to remain competitive, and two, the Sacramento Kings contract wise and as of right now, the assets on their roster, they're almost forced to remain competitive because of guys like Levine and Sabonis on their roster, two guys that more than likely would remain on this roster in any sort of LaMelo Ball trade this offseason. I think it's intriguing. I think it's something that if you're Scott Perry, you consider, you take a look at. It's a different route than going like a older veteran guard, like a Drew Holiday or other names that could be floated out, or Russell Westbrook potentially, who could be available. Russell would be significantly cheaper, but we're talking about like an older veteran guard to add to this now old and not so promising core that the Sacramento Kings have built for themselves. But could LaMelo Ball is he even available? Could he possibly be available? What would it take to get Charlotte to be willing to move on from their star? I can't answer these questions myself. So I'm like, you know what, Doug Branson, Locked on Hornets, hit him up, said, hey, I don't know if this is there's no rumors of this happening. I don't know if it's possible, but let's talk about it. Doug was great with his time. He and I break down what a LaMelo Ball trade could look like, kind of gives us an update on what the situation is in Charlotte, how willing they would be to trade him, and what kind of things that they would be most interested in a LaMelo Ball package from the Sacramento Kings. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Doug Branson from Locked on Hornets, nice enough to stop by the Locked on Kings podcast. Two podcast hosts stuck in the sea of irrelevancy in two teams and two organizations that feel relatively directionless, but one area where I'll give the Hornets the advantage over the Sacramento Kings. One, they're in the Eastern Conference. And two, they at least have some young players that could potentially develop into something down the road. Sacramento Kings willingly said bye-bye to all of that and are stuck with the Chicago Bulls, but in the Western Conference version. Doug, we're going to chat a little bit about something that I approached you with, something that has, we can't even call it been rumbling or rumored, just something that in Sacramento has been like, hey, that's an idea. The Kings are looking to get younger. They're looking for a new star/core player to build around, because I don't think Levine and Sabonis do it for them or anybody. And they're looking for a point guard, like desperately need a point guard. They have zero on this roster. LaMelo Ball checks all three of those boxes. Before we dive into the possible availability of LaMelo Ball and what it would take for the Hornets to even consider moving on from him, where are the Hornets at? Just to give us an idea of like the direction of the Charlotte Hornets. Where is this organization going? I know the draft lottery, sorry to bring up a wound. The draft lottery was a pretty disappointing day.
I think it was a disappointing day, to be fair, for a lot of teams. I mean, the Hornets actually got lucky that they landed. They sort of, it's that action scene where the person's falling off the cliff and they grab the final rock. Yeah. That was the Hornets with the 4th pick, while the Jazz and the Pelicans and the Wizards went flying over top of them. They grabbed the final rock. So I consider the Hornets a little bit lucky in that respect. As far as LaMelo Ball goes and where they are, to me, it's difficult to say, because I think everything that has been officially said by the organization and unofficially, rumored to have been said about LaMelo Ball is that the Hornets are not interested in trading him, that they have received calls about him. They've received interest, like, hey, what do you guys think about LaMelo Ball? But so far they have said, no, thanks. That's a guy that we signed to a max contract, and we think he has he's already made an all-star game. We think he has all NBA potential. We think he has, all the potential in the world to be the core of this franchise. What makes it complicated, of course, is the size of the contract, the length of the contract, and the injuries. When you combine all of that together, what does that mean for a team that has not been to the playoffs in almost 10 years? What does it mean for a franchise that hasn't won a playoff series in over 20 years? And how long can they continue on with young players that have never even tasted what it means to be in the playoffs? And how can you expect those players to grow and to become the full versions of themselves if you're not equipped to do that right away? And I don't think the Hornets are. So I think you throw all that into a pot and you say, it's complicated.
If I were the devil on the shoulder of the Charlotte Hornets, what I would be whispering in their ear essentially would be like, you're still so far away, even with LaMelo on this roster. By the way, a very relatable scenario for the Sacramento Kings in so many ways. But like, that's where I would go. So why, like, what timeline are you hoping to execute where, I mean, it might take you getting to the very end of this contract with some more draft picks in there and proper development of the rest of the team to even get to a point where you're winning basketball games with LaMelo. So if an offer were presented to you that reset that timeline or gave you a brighter, or the potential of a brighter future, or at least maybe more draft compensation or more options for a brighter future, maybe that would be the more appealing route to take. Is that wishful thinking from someone who's trying to convince an organization to give up a star player? Or do you think there's some thought there in Charlotte, like, can we even execute a rebuild and get back to the playoffs on LaMelo Ball's contractual timeline?
No, I think that fans are actually more confident in this organization's ability to rebuild than they have been in a very long time. I think they had completely lost faith that Michael Jordan and Mitch Kupchak as general manager were interested in doing what it took and also had the right vision. I think Michael Jordan at some point got tired of being a basketball lead owner and wanted to go race cars and now is doing that. And I'm sure he's very happy. But now you've got an ownership group that is invested in building a new practice facility downtown, which I think, again, is just like one of those things that says, hey, we're invested. We want to make sure that when we have opportunities to make trades and convince players to stay or to sign contracts or to even sign players in free agency, that we have the best facilities available. You have a general manager in Jeff Peterson who's young, but is well respected around the league in his time in Brooklyn and Atlanta, lots of connections. And so far, he has swung trades to move Terry Rozier and Gordon Hayward out of town and come back with lightly protected picks from the Miami Heat and Dallas Mavericks. And so he has a little bit of a Presti mindset in terms of building. So I would say, like, fans are hopeful that they can get out. The question is, do you do it with LaMelo, or do you have to use LaMelo in order to do that? And a lot of that's going to come down to what you think about Brandon Miller. Second season cut short by a wrist surgery. Do you think he's actually more of a prototypical super wing star number one player on the team than even LaMelo is? The other question is, with all of the injuries, with the multiple ankle injuries on ankle injuries, his season, actually this season, was ended with both a surgery on his wrist that he injured at the tail end of his rookie campaign, and then also another procedure to deal with the after effects of some of these ankle injuries and surgeries. Is whatever curve after he won Rookie of the Year, like whatever curve you imagined LaMelo's career taking, how much of that curve has been sort of blunted by the injuries, the lingering effects of the injuries, also the time that he has had to spend off the floor? Because you have to remember, LaMelo came into the league raw, young, had not played college basketball, played overseas, but was super talented. But he still is somebody that's going to need constant and consistent coaching. Charles Lee, the current head coach of the Charlotte Hornets, has already said, like, it's important for him to get his body right because there are things that we have to work on in terms of his game. He's not a complete player. And so, yeah, I think all of that complicates the situation for Charlotte, but the fans are confident that at least they're thinking in the right direction.
Well, that's a polar opposite from Sacramento Kings fans, who are now ushering in a new front office that they're hoping to be confident in. But I think the Kings fan base is kind of in a state of, like, prove it to me.
Right.
And I feel a LaMelo Ball deal, while would cost a pretty penny, and we'll probably get to that here in just a second, a LaMelo Ball deal might prove to this fan base that the Kings are still trying to be aggressive, but are trying to be smart about it. Like I said, LaMelo might be the type of guy that could potentially kill the three major birds that the Kings have with one stone. The Kings are also in a position, Doug, where they have guys on this roster, Keegan Murray, for example, that they would ideally not get rid of. But the Kings can't look at anybody at this roster and by any means say, you're untouchable, or no, this player is untouchable. Everybody should be and probably is available for the right price in Sacramento. I'm taking that mindset and applying that to Charlotte with the belief that it would be extremely difficult to get LaMelo Ball, But if you put an offer in front of Charlotte that they feel that they cannot refuse, it is possible. Do you think that is that fair?
Yes, I think that's fair. It's all going to come down to how quickly this franchise wants to compete, and everything that they've voiced on the record is that they are taking a patient approach with this, which came with a lot of groans from whatever is left of this fan base after so many years of losing, because they heard that a lot from Michael Jordan and Mitch Kupchak, and there is a little bit of impatience, fair impatience. But I think at the same time, again, they've made enough moves where you go, okay, I can give you a little bit more of a leash here to figure out how you're going to move this thing in the right direction. So I think if they do hold to that, then I think if they're going to move LaMelo Ball, it's going to be for a package that is more about the future assets, whether that be young two-way players. I mean, this team is starved for wing defense and impactful wing defense, like wing defense that can turn the other team over.
Relatable.
I think that, they're starved for shooting. And
Relatable.
Obviously, great. And then obviously, like, you love to bring back star power. I just don't know that it would even be the focus. I think it would be more about, can we get the 3 or 4 picks, depending on the protections necessary, so that you could go back to the fan base and said, look, this was a hard decision. We know everyone loved LaMelo, and he said all the right things, and he did all the right things, and he never tried to make a stink about things or force his way out. We felt like we had to do this in the best interest of the future of the franchise. They can't come at it with like 1 pick or 2 picks and Sabonis. That's just not going to cut it, I don't think. So that, I think, would be the mindset. I would hope would be the mindset of the franchise.
Today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by DoorDash. NBA fans, you know what time it is. Playoff season means big performances and even bigger rewards. DoorDash is bringing the heat with a slam dunk deal for DashPass members throughout the entire 2025 NBA playoffs. It's called They Swoosh, You Score. Anytime a player drops 50 or more points in a playoff game, DashPass members score a free 3-piece crispy tenders combo from Wingstop the very next day. Just place an order of $20 or more. Use code WINGSTOP50 at checkout, and that combo is yours. Crispy, delicious, and totally free. Offer valid noon to midnight the day after the game. Terms apply. Hey, what are your go-to moves after an epic game? Whether you're watching it in person or you're hanging around at home, are you ordering some wings or some grub and reliving the highlights? Imagine being rewarded with free food just because anybody, even an opponent of the team you're rooting for, drops 50 points. And if you ever looked at delivery fees and thought there's got to be a better way, well, with DashPass, you get $0 delivery free fees and exclusive perks like this one here. How much could you save over the course of a season? It's a lot of money. So here's the play. Sign up for DashPass to unlock this and more exclusive deals all season long. When any player scores 50 or more points in a playoff game, DashPass members can grab a free 3-piece crispy tenders combo from Wingstop the next day with a $20 order and code WINGSTOP50. That's DashPass, your door to more savings, more flavor, and more ways to win. Terms apply. So there's the route, because if there was a positive for the Sacramento Kings in losing their first-round draft pick, the Atlanta Hawks, in a trade that involved Kevin Huerter from 3 years ago, Doug, if there's a positive to it, it's that it freed up all of their draft compensation going forward. So new general manager Scott Perry takes over and has all of his assets to play with, in addition to all the Kings' own draft picks or first-round picks through like 2032. They also have a San Antonio Spurs unprotected pick from 2027, and they have a Minnesota Timberwolves unprotected pick from 2031. So it's not quite a Sam Presti treasure trove of draft pick assets, but it's something. That seems like it would be the route to really make the conversation serious. I won't say get the conversation done, but really make the conversation serious. So in your mind, if you're just completely ballparking to get the Hornets to have a conversation, you kind of touched on it there. Like 3 first-round picks is the base, right? If we're talking, because the Kings are the contracts that the Sacramento Kings have that they'd be willing to trade in a LaMelo Ball deal do not fit that timeline of the Hornets like you're talking. Like there's nothing Zach LaVine or Domantas Sabonis or DeMar DeRozan do. None of them do anything for the Charlotte Hornets. So it's draft and maybe Keegan Murray or Keon Ellis or something like that. What, like when you just think or like on the top of your head, like what comes to mind of this is what I would need to even consider LaMelo from the Kings. How many picks? What are we talking?
Yeah, I think if a team did not have a star that made sense, or the young like wing players that made sense for the timeline, then I think it would all be about getting 3 or 4 picks, getting some other team involved that would take on the salary and could do more with a DeRozan or a LaVine that would benefit them more, so that the Hornets don't have that around their neck for the next 3 or 4 seasons. Yeah, I think that's where the conversation would have to start. But I think what's going to happen, what I suspect will happen, is that if these conversations ever take place, there's going to have to be a meeting in the middle of, if you're Jeff Peterson, you're saying to someone else, this is the cornerstone of our franchise. We have to bring something back that is meaningful enough to give up the cornerstone of our franchise. And the other general manager is going to say, yes, but he's had like 17 ankle injuries, right? Like there has to be some understanding that, cornerstone or not, that this is a player that not only is going to come with that injury baggage, but also has never played in a single playoff game. And I think that's a big deal. I think part of the reason why they had difficulty before moving PJ Washington, they eventually did convince a desperate Dallas team that wanted to make the finals really badly to give up that first round pick. But before that, in trying to move some of these players, they had a lot of difficulty moving them because they had not had that play. These young players had not had that playoff experience. And so I think that always is going to make a trade difficult when you can't, convince another GM, hey, this player has been there, done that, and they'll do it for you.
Speaking from experience, Doug, having your general manager trade the cornerstone of your franchise for basically nothing or a bad contract like Zach LaVine doesn't feel very, very good. So I understand that. See, Kings fans, this is the proper approach to trading your star, is actually getting something in return, not just punting on it because you have a week before the trade deadline.
Well, and we've talked about the Fox situation on Locked On Hornets as it relates to the LaMelo situation, because while LaMelo has said all of the right things, he has been, again, on paper, just extremely loyal to the Charlotte Hornets, or on paper and in press conferences has been extremely loyal to the Charlotte Hornets, has said nothing, has not even given the media a little whiff of anything. How much of that is him missing so many games? Like how could he even sort of make that plea when he hasn't played a lot of basketball games? Although that hasn't stopped other, players in the past from doing that. But my question would be, if he does play a full healthy season over the next 2 years and the Hornets still can't get to the playoffs, then when does that start to become a conversation? Or alternatively, if he can't play another full healthy season, like if he gets another ankle injury 20 games into the season and, only plays 30-ish games, where does that trade value sit then? Like, it might be, in terms of risk, your risk reward profile, this might be as good as it gets for LaMelo. So I think the franchise would be wise to keep accepting those calls. And if they get a team desperate enough to make this move, it might be in the best interest of this particular version of the franchise to get more serious about that conversation.
And that's what I wonder too, is, are the Sacramento Kings desperate enough to mortgage so much of their future or trade so much of their future for Ball? And can the Charlotte Hornets hope to get anything better down the road, even if LaMelo has a fantastic and healthy season? How much better can it get than what the Kings might be? Again, this is all legend. We have no idea, but might be willing to trade right now. Let me ask you, like, to separate yourself from the Hornets, which I know is difficult to do, and just your temperature on LaMelo as the guy and the possibility of a team trading minimum sounds like 3 first-round picks, probably pick swaps in there as well. Like, a humongous investment of their future into LaMelo as the new centerpiece of their franchise. How do you feel about LaMelo's ability to be worth that risk, I suppose?
If you expect him to be the guy, I think it's a huge risk. And we've talked about this on Locked On Hornets. Is he a number 1 or is he ultimately a number 2? And I think we've landed on that if the Hornets were going to be successful, it's going to be because Brandon Miller ascends to a Paul George-like, prime Paul George number one. And then LaMelo is facilitating a lot of that and, scoring a lot of threes, making a lot of great passes, reducing the number of turnovers. We've had is LaMelo a Cade Cunningham type of guard who is going to get downhill, force a lot of contact, get to the free throw line, be efficient that way, and then make steals on maybe not be as disciplined defensively, but you're going to make some steals? Or is he going to be Tyrese Halliburton, who is more about, I'm going to hit a few threes a game, maybe 4 or 5 threes, and I'm going to pass more. I'm going to reduce my turnovers. And I think we had this conversation before Halliburton just absolutely exploded in these playoffs. But I think we landed on this idea that if he's going to be anything, because of his body type and because of, I think, some of the defensive limitations, he was going to gravitate more towards being a Tyrese Halliburton. And, again, the risk is the injury takes all of that away. If he has another severe ankle injury, that takes all that away. Now, to his credit, he has finally gotten more serious about getting into the weight room and doing some of the things that Steph Curry did, wearing something on his ankles. I don't know if they're like the serious Steph Curry ankle braces, but he's wearing something on his ankles now. He's taking it more seriously because I think he sees, he signed the max contract, so there's a little bit of a responsibility there. But also I think he sees like, hey, this could be the defining sort of moment of my career. Am I going to be a player that plays for another, 7 to 10 years or not? But at the same time, you can do everything right in that respect. And these things are freaky, and the body's freaky, and everybody's body's different, and it could all go a different way. So going back to my original thesis there, if you're expecting him to be the number one guy and to drag your team to the playoffs, he's just not proven that he could do that. He because of injuries, but also I would have some serious questions otherwise about his ability to do that just because of the structure of his game, if that makes any sense.
Is the maturity part of the conversation, is that over and done with? Because I remember that being a big thing with Ant, and now nobody really talks about it anymore because he's balling in the playoffs and maybe heading to the finals. For an organization that, again, not only looking for a number one guy to help them win with, but the cornerstone of their franchise. And I know Charlotte has dealt with this is LaMelo mature enough? Can he become mature enough to be the centerpiece of a potentially championship winning team? Is that conversation just kind of over and done with because of the Ball family and everything? Or is that still lingering, you think? Should that still be a topic of conversation for a team trying to acquire him?
I'm not sure that the Anthony Edwards conversation is done. It's evolved. And I think that's what happens when players win playoff series and start to advance. The idea evolves into, do they have the attitude? Do they have the ability to take responsibility, the ability to be mature in the face of, imminent danger, or in the face of a 3-1 hole, to help pull their team a little bit closer or pull them out of it completely. And I think that's yet to be seen with Anthony Edwards, who I think, is not shooting the ball a ton in this series. And feels like he's putting a lot of that blame on other people. So I think to answer that question, you have to be put into the fire. And that's the risk with bringing on somebody like LaMelo Ball, is that he has not been through that. He has been part of play-in blowouts, but he has not been part of a team that has had to face a 7-game series. The playoffs are just an entirely different beast. Maybe he's totally made for that, and the Hornets haven't done a good enough job, circumstances, the injuries, and the Hornets haven't done a good enough job of putting talent around him quickly enough. I certainly may have made that argument on Locked On Hornets that Mitch and Jordan were old school, and they said, young rookie, you're going to young rookie. And they didn't say, oh my God, we have a bag of gold, let's go get some silver and put around it and get this guy to the playoffs so that he can learn, so that he can do those things. They didn't do that, unfortunately. They wanted to, because I think they wanted to cheap out a little bit and see if LaMelo could sort of, in that Trae Young way, magically evolve the Hornets into a sudden playoff threat. And it just never materialized. So the risk is that he hasn't been through that. So you don't know how he's going to react to that pressure. I think he's matured a lot since he was a young kid. Lonzo Ball, his brother, would back that up, that he was a little bit of a rapscallion as a kid and got into a lot of trouble that even Lonzo couldn't talk about on the air. But he hasn't necessarily been that for Charlotte. He's not a player you can market. He's just too sort of, he's so totally himself. I mean, his whole brand is one of one, rare, and he is very much, he's not very talkative. We'll flash some birds and like official team photos occasionally, or not official team photos, but like photos that are being taken around certain events. Like there's just these little things where you go, hi, this guy's probably not going to ever be the sort of commercial success. And a lot of the same conversations that we have about Anthony Edwards, right? Because of the cursing, because of so on and so forth, it's more difficult to make that player the face of a franchise or the face of a league. But I think more importantly, how will he respond as a player to, if the Hornets ever make the playoffs? I think the first step is going to be losing that first 7-game series. What does that do to him? That's a question that we just simply don't know the answer to.
Doug, we'll wrap with this because I always think you can learn something from the outside perspective on your organization. What do you make of just the Sacramento Kings right now from whatever perspective that you have, however much you've paid attention to them? And I mean, a lot of people consider the Charlotte Hornets, or from what I've heard, my perspective has been like a lot of people have considered the Charlotte Hornets to be in one of the toughest places. But again, at least they have young talent, unlike Sacramento at this point. Where would you swap the circumstances with Sacramento, I suppose, or are you comfortable and confident with kind of where Charlotte is? I know you're exchanging bad for bad here.
Yeah, well, but you've had a Christmas Day game recently, or not recently, but you've had a Christmas Day game within ever. I mean, the Hornets have not had that. National TV games, ago. Right? I think you've had one of those. You've had a playoff series win. So in a lot of ways, yeah. I mean, the Hornets fan base is in the desert, and you are maybe a dirty pond. It's going to taste great to the person that's in the desert. Maybe to you, it doesn't seem great, but to the person that is in the desert, it is quenching a thirst. I think when I look at the Sacramento Kings from the outside looking in, I don't have all the information that you do. I'm not as plugged in. But when I look at that situation, I think, man, it's really hard to win in this league. And it's even harder to, once you do win, to sustain that winning. It takes obviously talent, it takes luck, but organizationally, it takes both a desire to do things. You have to want to do those things. Jordan and Kupchak, they didn't want to do those things. Matt Ishbia over at the Suns, he wants to do a lot of stuff. But then it's that other thing, which is the discipline, it's the patience that is required, and really threading those really tight windows of what to do and what not to do, and not to be hasty. And that's what we'll have to grade Jeff Peterson and company on in Charlotte. And also the final thing is communication. I looked at that whole De'Aaron Fox thing and I thought, if somebody just would have talked to somebody, including your own organization, to the press, so many problems I think would have been solved. And so just like fair and honest communication would go a long way in a lot of these franchises that have been stuck, in the mud, spinning their tires over and over. And I've said this a lot about Charlotte when the new version of the ownership group and the general manager came in. I said, look, you have to be honest about what the problems are, because the previous version of the organization was not, and you cannot fix problems that you're unwilling to admit are problems.
Words of wisdom from Doug Branson there. I'm very curious, Doug, to hear what Sacramento Kings fans think about a potential LaMelo Ball trade, and even what Charlotte Hornets fans think about a potential LaMelo Ball trade in the package that the Kings may or may not be willing to offer for him. I appreciate you taking the time, Doug. We'll get through this offseason together, and one of these days we'll get a Kings Hornets NBA Finals, and everybody inside of Sacramento and Charlotte will love it. Probably the rest of the league will hate it, but hey, we'll have fun in 2100 or something, whatever
that's
happens.
It. We'll get out of the desert. You'll clean up the dirty pond, and we'll play in the river. That's it.
The river sounds good. I'll take a river right now. I will take a river. Doug, appreciate you taking the time, my friend. Thank you so much.
Thank you.